Hey guys, it's Steven here. Today we're going to be looking at one of my favorite formulas for algebra called the quadratic formula. Let's start by looking at this equation. X minus 25 is equal to 0. Now your goal in a question like this is to figure out what's the missing value for x that would make the equation true. And in this case, there's only one value that would make the equation true, and that's the value 25, because 25 minus 25 is equal to 0, and there's no other number in the entire universe that would make that true. Now, we're going to go back to that original question and change one little thing about it. We're going to make x to the second power, which means x times x. Now, what number would make this equation true? Well, one number that would make it true is the number 5, because 5 to the second power, or 5 times 5, is equal to 25, and 25 minus 25 is equal to 0. But there's actually a second number that would make it true, a second solution. And the second solution is negative 5, because negative 5 times negative 5 is also positive 25, and positive 25 minus 25 is equal to 0. So there are two solutions to this equation. Now these two equations have solutions that are fairly intuitive, especially if you're very comfortable with your multiplication facts and how positive and negative numbers work. But when you get to a more complicated equation, like say this one, it's awfully hard to guess and check. For questions like this, we have a perfect tool in the toolbox though, and it's called the quadratic formula. It's actually a tool that's designed to give you the two solutions to an equation like the one we just saw. Now it's quite a lengthy looking formula there, but we're going to break it down one step at a time, and by the end of this video, you're going to know how to use the quadratic formula to find those two solutions to the equation. So I know it looks pretty intense, but just stick with me. I know you can do this. Before we begin with the quadratic formula, let's take a quick look at quadratic equations. A quadratic is an unknown quantity or variable involving the second and no higher power. An equation is a statement that the values of two mathematical expressions are equal. So we put those two definitions together and we get a quadratic equation is a statement that the values of two mathematical expressions are equal involving the second power of an unknown variable. What about the quadratic formula? The quadratic formula is a formula that gives the solutions of the general quadratic equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is known as the standard form of a quadratic equation, or as I like to call it, the stud finder. The first thing we do to tackle this very challenging question is to use our stud finder to find the A stud, B stud, and C stud of our particular question. In the one we just saw, the A stud is the number 1, the B stud, positive 5, and the C stud, positive 4. Now that we've located our three stud values, we're going to mark them on our paper, almost like we're marking a little X on the wall where the studs are. Using our quadratic formula, we're going to match up the formula with the three stud values that we found. So let's see how it plays out. We begin by taking our B value, which is 5, and listing a negative sign in front of it. Next, we draw our plus and minus symbol, kind of a crazy looking symbol. It's read as plus or minus. Draw a big square root symbol. Perform the operation b squared, or b to the second power, which is 5 times 5, or 25. Next, we find the product, or multiply, negative 4 times a times c, which is negative 16. Draw your fraction bar and multiply 2 times a. 2 times 1 is 2. I'd like to take a moment and highlight what I think is the hardest part of this entire question, deceptively so. It's the bit where we do -4 times a times c. In fact, I would recommend, as you're working through this question, to take that bit of the formula and write it down separate from the rest of the formula and perform just that bit. So -4 times a times c in this case is -4 times 1 times 4. -4 times 1 is -4. -4 times +4 is -16. Now that we have that result, we can put it right in the formula where it belongs. Okay, once you get to this point in the question, just hang in a little bit longer. We're actually only 2 major steps away from being done. The first step, the first place your eyes should go, is to calculate the square root of 25 minus 16 in this case. So 25 minus 16 is equal to 9, and the square root of 9 is equal to 3. Because 3 times 3 is 9. Bring everything else down carefully and place it next to that result. The second and final big step is to take care of that odd-looking symbol, the plus and minus symbol. That's where your eyes should go next. This symbol actually means that we're going to separate this fraction into 2 separate fractions. One where we add at the top of the fraction, and one where we subtract at the top of the fraction. So that plus or minus symbol is a strange looking symbol. It might be the first time you've ever seen it, but it's there because we're going to have up to 2 solutions for a question like this. We'll start with the fraction on the left. -5 plus 3 is equal to -2, and -2 divided by 2 is equal to -1. On the right, -5 minus 3 is -8, and -8 divided by 2 is -4. Now these 2 values are the 2 solutions for the original equation, which means that we should be able to change the variable x, that missing number, to either -1 or -4 and come up with a true statement in the end. To demonstrate that, we'll start with -1, and remember -1 squared at the very beginning is +1, and then we're going to multiply 5 by -1 as well in the middle of the equation, as you see here. And what we end up with is this statement that -4 plus 4 is equal to 0, which of course is true. We can do the same thing with -4. And again, remember at the very first step, -4 squared means -4 times -4, which is +16. In the middle, we do 5 times -4, which is -20. Add all of those values together, and we get, once again, -4 plus 4 is equal to 0. A true statement. So indeed, -1 and -4 are the 2 numbers that will make this equation true. They are the 2 solutions. To be more precise, we could even say x is equal to -1 and x is equal to -4. Yes, you've done it! The quadratic formula, one of the most complicated formulas, but one of the coolest formulas in algebra. You have done it, so keep at it, keep practicing, and you'll have this thing mastered in no time.